Hello everyone, this is Martha reading Hedgehog with my January 2017 reading wrap-up. Long time no see. I know I've been absent again and just not even going to try to explain, but hopefully I will be back in doing this on a regular basis. We'll try. So yeah, better late than never. I will jump into my January reading wrap-up. January was actually a pretty good month. A really strong start to the year. So just give you some stats. In total, I read 9 books in January. 6 of them were middle grade and rereads, to be honest, and 2 of them were young adult. I read 4 out of 5 stars reads, 1 3 out of 5 star reads, and 3 5 out of 5. In total, I read 2,479 pages. So yeah, pretty good month. Even though I cheated a little bit, you'll see how. But yeah, let's just jump straight into the books. So the first book I read in January, technically finished, was Three Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. This is the first book in the Three Dark Crowns. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. It's Kendare Blake's newest trilogy. It is YA fantasy, high fantasy, and I gave this 4 out of 5, I believe. Yes, 4 out of 5 stars. So this follows 3 sisters on this island, this fantasy island, and every few years, I don't remember if it really said how many years, the island has to pick a new queen out of these 3 sisters, these triplets, and only one of them can take the throne, and the others have to be killed. So the three sisters, when they come into their powers, there's 3 different kinds. They then have to prove that they're the strongest by killing their other 2 sisters. And throughout this, we follow all 3 of them, so we get a perspective from all 3 of the sisters. And it was really interesting because I ended up loving all of them. And I'm not sure how I feel about, any of them potentially dying. They're all really good characters. They're all very strong in their different ways, and I sympathize with all of them in very different ways. So yeah, this was a really good start to the new trilogy. I can't wait to see what happens next. I know a lot of people thought that this was really slow, but there's a lot of world building in it, and there's a lot of setting up for the next one, so I totally was okay with the pace, and yeah, really look forward to seeing what happens next. After that, I read Replica by Lauren Oliver. This is the first book, and I believe it's going to be a duology, but I am not positive. And I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. This is a YA science fiction. Probably is the category I would put it in. And some of you may have been hearing about this book. It kind of got a lot of pre-publication hype because of the way it's told. So it's told from 2 different perspectives. One is from Lyra, and the other one is Gemma. And I can't really tell you what it's about because it kind of will it's easy to ruin this book if I do. It's told from 2 different perspectives from these 2 different girls, and one half of the book is told from Lyra's point of view, and then you flip it over and read Gemma's. Now this is designed so you can actually read this book in whatever order you want. You can read through Lyra's perspective entirely and then flip over and read Gemma's, or you can flip-flop between the 2. This was a buddy read with my friend Hazel. I will link her channel down below, and each of us read it in different ways. She read it, I believe, she started with Gemma's storyline first, and then she flipped over to Lyra's when she was done with Gemma's. I read it alternating, and it was a very interesting experience. I got kind of the more filled-in storyline, so there wasn't a ton of mystery. I think Hazel would agree that reading it the way she did, starting with one narration and then finishing and then reading the next, she got more of a mystery, and you'll get a different mystery depending on whose narration you start with. Story-wise, it was good. For the type of story it is, and again, I'm not going to say what it is because depending on what narration you start with, it could be a surprise. But for the type of story it was actually pretty original, and I really liked how she did it, and the characters were really good. It didn't wow me, hence just 3 out of 5, but it was really fun. It was really good and entertaining, and I especially enjoyed the different way that you could read it and the different experience you would get depending on how you read it, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. This definitely could go into a second book. Hopefully it's just going to stay a duology because I don't really want it to become a trilogy. But 3 out of 5 for Replica by Lauren Oliver. It was great. After that, I started to do some rereads. I've been meaning to reread this series for a very long time, and then I got motivation recently, and you'll probably guess why when you see what it was. So I picked up some rereads, and they were The Bad Beginning and The Reptile Room by Lemony Snicket, book 1 and 2 in the series Unfortunate Events. This is middle grade. I don't really know entirely what you classify as. I put it in kind of the mystery genre, and especially the further along you get in the series, it does become more of a mystery series. It's kind of comedy slash satire, kind of whimsy. It's a really hard one to categorize. These got 5 out of 5 stars, and quite honestly, that is a biased rating because I grew up with these books. I adored them. I was the most devoted Snicketeer you could find. Well, I'm sure there are a few others out there. Funny story, I actually had one of the main forums convinced that I was Lemony Snicket for a number of years. It was not intentional, but it was still pretty fun. So I started rereading this series this year, and in fact in January, because of the Netflix series Unfortunate Events series that came out. Not going into my opinions about that entirely. If you want to know, please let me know, and I will do a video review of that series, of the Netflix series, if you want to know. But essentially, to kind of sum it up, I didn't like it. There was like maybe 2 things I liked about it. But overall, I really did not like it, and this is coming from someone who's devoted to this series still. But it did motivate me to reread this series, and it's still as good as I remember it being. So for those of you who may not know, it follows the 3 Baudelaire orphans. Their parents die in a fire, and they are given over to Count Olaf as their legal guardian by their totally clueless banker Mr. Poe is in charge of their affairs until Violet, the eldest Baudelaire, comes of age to inherit the fortune. And this essentially just kind of follows them as they go from guardian to guardian, and Olaf keeps trying to catch them so he can steal their fortune away. And as the series goes on, it starts introducing some other elements that that enhance the storyline and just kind of make it even more mysterious and crazy, and it's really cool and very addictive. And yeah, I still remember these being as good as I remember them being as a kid, but again, my rating is probably a little biased because these are childhood favorites and I can't give them anything less than 5 stars. So after that, I finally picked up A World Without Princes by Saman Chinaini. I'm sure I butchered that again. But this is the second book in the School for Good and Evil trilogy. This is technically middle grade fantasy. I maintain that it is very easily enjoyed by young adults as well. Even if you don't particularly like middle grade, this is a pretty older middle grade slash younger YA, but again, I think YA people will really enjoy this. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and this pretty much just picks up where the last one left off. Sophie and Agatha have returned to their world, and they're both in their own way kind of missing the School for Good and Evil, especially Agatha. She's wondering if she made the right choice and whether or not she should have stayed with Tedros. And then one night, one of them, or both of them, make a wish, and suddenly they find themselves back at the School for Good and Evil, but things aren't the way they left them. Suddenly, the girls have realized that, they don't need princes anymore, and the schools have actually divided into the school for girls and the school for boys. And they are at each other's throats, and the only way to end it is if they kill Sophie, or if one of them makes a wish and Agatha chooses Tedros and stays, or if she chooses if she chooses Sophie and they both go back. Again, 4 out of 4 stars. Really liked it. My friend Catherine read this before I did, and she kept telling me, she's like, you're gonna get so frustrated with Agatha and Sophie and all that, and I actually surprisingly did not. I was expecting to, because I actually got really frustrated with them in the first book, which I did also really like, but I still got frustrated. But I actually really understood both of their struggles. I understood, their motivations, and you kind of just say, poor Tedros. Poor Tedros suffers through this. I mean, just, I feel really bad for him in this one. But yeah, I felt really bad for both Agatha and Sophie. I didn't think I was going to feel sorry for Sophie, but I actually did. But this was, you know, just as good as the first one, and the world continues to be really rich and neat, and I actually really love the direction this took, because it's great because you got all of these new fairy tale retellings where the girls don't ever really need, the princes pretty much become obsolete in all these fairy tale retellings. You know, they're very, you know, girl power centered and all that, and this kind of takes that, and it's like, you know, what's the purpose of princes then? You know, what happens to them? And it's just, it's great. I loved it. It doesn't attack that thing, but it does kind of, it makes fun of that concept, and it's awesome. So yes, 4 out of 5 for A World Without Princes. I cannot wait to read the third one. Then after that, I continued on with my trip down nostalgia lane with The Wide Window and The Miserable Mill, book 3 and 4 of a series Unfortunate Events. Both of these got 4 out of 5 strawberries, I believe. Let me look. Yeah, no. The Wide Window got 5 out of 5, and Miserable got 4 out of 5, and this just continues on with the storyline, with the series. Miserable Mill has always been my least favorite. I still like it, but out of all of them, it probably is my least favorite, even though it has one of my favorite Olaf disguises in it. But in general, I've just never been a super big fan of the Miserable Mill, hence the 4 out of 5 star rating, but that's still very biased. It's probably more it's probably more of a 3-star read. But again, sorry, you're gonna have to excuse the bias on this. But still love them all. Still really love them. Wide Window is still one of my favorites. Yeah. Really fun rereading this series. And then finally, the last book I read in January was The Scourge by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This is also technically middle grade, but could also be enjoyed by YA readers. This is also another one I have a hard time categorizing because it is not fantasy, but it's not exactly alternate history because it does not take place in our world, but at the same time it's got a very historical feel to it, so I just threw it in the adventure category because we'll call it that. And it's about this girl whose name I'm totally forgetting, Annie Mells, who lives in a world where it's being ravaged by this mysterious disease called the Scourge. It does not differentiate between weak and young, or old, or strong. There's no way to predict who it's going to hit next. And once you get it, there is no cure. Well, Annie and her friend Weasel end up being captured by some very unfriendly ruling people who kind of control her country now. And they are tested positive for the Scourge, even though they swear they both don't have it. And they are sent to the Scourge colony, where people are supposedly sent to live out their dying days peacefully. But when Annie gets there, she finds out that the colony is not peaceful, it's not a wonderful place, and that there's also a lot more to the disease than what most people realize. As usual, Jennifer A. Nielsen has amazing characters. I mean, her protagonist, Annie, is extremely wonderful and snarky and hysterical and strong. She doesn't have an attitude, but she's definitely got spunk. Doesn't always make the right decisions and kind of causes some of her own trouble, but, you know, it's hard to not like her. And her best friend Weasel, I adored him. He's kind of the reasonable one of the two. He balances her out really well. They balance each other out. And I just loved their friendship, and this is not a spoiler, it does develop into romance, and I loved it. It was just so sweet. And I also really liked the really snotty girl whose name I'm forgetting that ends up going to the colony with them. I generally don't like this kind of characters if they end up, you know, being quote-unquote redeemed in the end. But I was okay if she ended up being redeemed because I kind of felt sorry for her, even though she caused a lot of problems for Annie. And the world is just really cool, and I really like the direction the story took, and yeah, it was good, and it had some surprises in it. So 4 out of 5 for The Scourge. Jennifer L. Nielsen, once again, has not disappointed. So there also are all the books that I read in January, and yeah, it was a pretty good month, and it looks like February is actually going to be a pretty good month too, and I will see you guys around with my January book haul. Bye!